Jeff and Alyssa Bethke have been happily married for 5 years. But before they met, Jeff had a distorted view of relationships, and Alyssa had never held a guy's hand.
We're infected with this disease of fake love, of a bad view of love, of lies we believe about sexuality and marriage, and it's killing us.
In their new book, Love That Lasts, Jeff and Alyssa offer lessons from their own personal successes and failures, and present a realistic option for love, dating, and marriage. Well, Jefferson and Alyssa Bethke are with us now. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thanks for having us.
We're thrilled to have you. And boy, in reading your book, I mean, it's really interesting. You two came together with such different backgrounds and histories in dating. Who wants to tackle that one first?
Well, it only took us about a day to realize that, by the way. We actually kind of figured that one out in dating season, even, of how different the stories are. But I actually think where that can be sometimes perceived as a weakness, I think we see it as a strength. And it took us some years to get there. And what I mean by that is, I think it's, the first time the phrase image of God shows up in Scripture, it's actually in a plurality, not an individual, right? It's Genesis 1:26 and 27, and it says, in male plus female, he created them in the image of God. And of course, we're created individually in the image of God, but it does seem like Scripture is trying to say something that, like, this male plus female, two becoming one, becomes this new image. And I think our difference is we kind of started seeing, like, hey, that's us coming together to actually be a more fuller, more rounded picture of who Jesus wants us to be.
What were those differences?
you tell them that one.
Well, we have a lot of differences just obviously in our personality. Our personality is way different. I'm very slow. I like to pray about everything. Jeff's quick, let's make a decision. But also just our backgrounds were a lot different. He grew up with a single mom, more a prodigal son story where he just did whatever felt good, whatever looked good, whatever the culture told him. And I'm a single child, grew up in a Christian home and kind of more the kiss dating goodbye, not gonna date, any of this stuff. So I think our backgrounds, it's not what I would have pictured, but I'm so thankful that the Lord had him for me. And I feel like I just see such a bigger picture of his grace and understand a lot more than if I had married maybe someone who had grown up in the Christian home and that kind of thing.
So dating has to be important. Well, should be important with every couple, I guess. Sometimes we just see it as sort of the, getting to know each other and then heading toward the long-term commitment. But really, it's supposed to be something that is God-led and even determines whether we do move forward in a relationship or not. Talk about the significance of it.
Yeah, I think dating is huge. I think there's a lot of pressure on dating. There's so many different things. I feel like maybe the Christian culture puts too much pressure on it, where if I ask a girl to coffee, then I need to propose the next day. And you're like, that's not.
And it better be creative, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I feel like the culture is just whatever, let's hook up, let's just, all this stuff. Act married when you're not.
There has
to be an in-between. But it is really important because you're discovering each other, you're talking about your baggage, you're learning about each other, what your family's like, and
I think you don't need to get married the next day, and that actually is way too much kind of religious pressure that we've kind of infected into the culture. But what I will but what I will say is I do think you date don't date unless you're in a season of maybe seeing marriage at least somewhere down the road, or dating with the intention of marriage. And the best quote I heard, which I think I put it in the book, was, dating without the intention of marriage is like going to the grocery store with no money. You either take something that isn't yours or you leave unsatisfied. And that's a lot of us kind of live in that, especially our kind of age and generation. We just do it because it feels good and right, but you have no vision, you have no purpose, and that leads to a lot of hurt and damage.
Well, some of it is we don't want to be alone.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's us trying to meet our shallow needs of intimacy that God first wants to meet, that then you can go out in a more healthy way.
Right. What do you think about these apps or websites to meet somebody?
Well, actually, it's funny because we're pretty young, but we're kind of
we just missed it.
We never had Tinder when we were dating, so it's new for
Tinder
us too.
And some of these other online Christian dating. So we say this. We say we're kind of for almost all of them, but we also have known a lot of ways to distort and misuse them. And so it really comes down to obedience, healthy heart, making sure you're going about it for the right reasons and not just using them for the wrong reasons.
And use an updated picture, please.
Exactly, right? It's they usually use one, and then you meet the person, you're like, that was you 17 years ago.
I was going to say there should be a criteria of how much time is spanned from the taking of the picture to the posting of it. Alyssa, talk a little bit about to single women whose heart desire is to meet someone, to be married, to have a family, but it's just not happening. Talk about waiting a little bit.
So in the book I wrote about that in chapter 4, and for me, I remember, because I didn't date until I was 22, and then I got married to Jeff, but I remember and it's funny looking back, 'cause I'm like, I was pretty young then, but I remember being in that and being in high school and being in college when all my friends were dating and getting married and getting engaged and I had nobody. And it's just this really hard, it can be really, really hard. And you go through seasons where sometimes it's really great and you're like, you know, traveling the world or living out your dreams. And then sometimes it's just, wow, like I feel like I can't go one more second without like waiting anymore, you know? Like, Lord, if you make me wait one more minute, I'm not gonna make it. And I think, though, in our singleness, with whatever we're waiting for, whether it's to meet somebody or children or a job or all these things, it's really an opportunity to trust the Lord. And, you know, and all throughout the Psalms, it gives verses about waiting on Him and all these promises of who He is. And I feel like when you wait on Him, when you're waiting for something, it's this opportunity. Do you really believe that God is who He says He is, that He will do what He promises to do? Do you really believe He's good even when you don't have exactly what you want when you want it? Do you believe that He's faithful, that He hears you? And so it's really this opportunity to just draw close to Him and to pray and pour out your heart to Him and to continue to do it. And it's not so much I'm going to pray so that He answers, which He does, but it's praying so that you can just get to know Him. And He just wants to know us. And sometimes I feel like He makes us wait longer just so He's like, I just love it when you talk to me. So just keep coming.
Jefferson, one of the things you touched on in your book is a big decision is when to break up. When is a dating relationship? When's the time to be over? I think sometimes Christians may get into a hero mentality. Well, I need to get my the one I'm dating saved. It's my mission. I mean, can we be misguided there sometimes? Yeah,
they call it, you know, the flirt to convert method. But yeah, you know, or missionary dating. But yeah, I mean, I think it's problematic because it kind of puts this savior complex into the center, which then means you're trying to be like Jesus. One quick anecdote or example I'll be specific on is this happens a lot with pornography, especially with the girls towards the guy who's addicted. The girl kind of says, he has this problem, he has this addiction, I can fix him. Or if I break up with him, it's maybe showing him that I'm not showing him grace or I'm not showing him forgiveness. And I get that, but at the end of the day, you don't, like, porn, research has come out, it's very clear, porn is an actual addiction, neurologically and biologically, and you don't do that with any other addiction, right? Your boyfriend who's addicted to cocaine, you don't say, well, I'll just kind of stay with him and hope, see if he gets it figured out. No, you say, me breaking up with you is actually the most grace-filled thing because you need to go get help and you need to go seek treatment and professional help and all those different things. And so that's one of those examples of actually, if you guys aren't on the same wavelength and there's not a healthiness in the relationship, and especially when you're dating, when there's no covenant of marriage, sometimes the best thing you can do is actually allow each other to go separate ways to work on themselves and the Lord.
Is it okay? This is like Bring It On from the 700 Club.
You can hardly get it out.
Is it okay to have sex before marriage? I mean, we laugh a bit, but obviously this is a huge decision for even a lot of Christians in dating relationships.
Yeah, I mean, it was one of those saddest studies I've ever read. I think it was CNN that reported 2 years ago that 88% of non-Christians are having sex before. I mean, 88% of people are having sex before marriage. 80% of Christians are having sex before marriage. So Jesus only makes an 8% difference, apparently, in sexual choices before marriage, which is sad. And I think so it's a question that's important, a question that's very pertinent right now. What I like to tell people is most people make that question about fear, about legalism, about rules, when in reality, God's rules are always for our blessing. And specifically, we see that sex is created for the covenant of marriage because that's the only thing that has the sustaining power for it. Sex is so beautiful and holy and powerful that it needs some type of boundary to actually hold it. And marriage is the only thing that can do that. And so what we like to say is sex is almost this final act in the play of marriage of what you should already be doing emotionally, spiritually, mentally, financially, and that's becoming one, right? You should already be doing that. Like you should be able to see each other in full nakedness metaphorically. I see all that you are, I see all your failures, your shortcomings, and I still want to be one with you. And then sex becomes this outplay of that. And when you understand that that's what sex is rather than just this cheap thing for pleasure, then you realize, yeah, sex before marriage actually doesn't make sense because my life isn't saying that, right? And so another way to put it is don't let your body say something your life isn't. Because you're very clearly saying with your bank statements and with your house and with your job and with your life and with your emotions that you're not one. And so it's just going to misfire and short circuit if you let your body say that.
Yeah. And talk a little bit, Alyssa, if you will, about God's vision for sex. Because in Christendom, we sometimes see marriage as the end goal, and it's such a big, you know, got to do this, got to be there, got to do that. But maybe if we understood God's vision of it, it would even change the way we see marriage.
Yeah, well, sex, I believe sex is like a reciting of your vows. So when you're married, it's like you're remembering in this moment, hey, like I'm committed to you no matter what, we are one. I see all of you, we're together. And just like Jeff said, in dating, it just doesn't sustain it. Like there's no promise that can sustain it. And I remember a pastor when I was in college was saying, sex is like a fire. And you know, fire is great if it's in the fireplace.
And
but
brings
if it's,
warmth,
and it brings
food, and
yeah, but if it's in the middle of your living room, it's gonna burn your whole house down. And so really, it's this beautiful thing, like it's not a bad thing, which I think a lot of Christians can think of. It's this beautiful thing that God created. It's good, but it's within marriage, within the promise.
And that's just one quick thing I'll touch on, what she reminded me of. Then the polar opposite problem is sometimes in religious circles, like what she said, it's because it's so much based on fear and pressure to not do it, then it's just the no, 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 no for 25 years, and then all of a sudden on Sunday at 3 p.m. under the church, it's supposed to be great.
Yes.
That's just like this insane cognitive dissonance, right? And so I think it's about, hey, it's good and holy and amazing in its context. Let's teach you how that is.
Jefferson, I think one thing we need to hit on, again, we touched on it, but this issue of pornography, and it is, you've made some great points in your book that this generation coming up now, they have always had access to pornography on phones or whenever they want it. And it's ruining lives, and it's something you overcame.
And that's, I mean, it has reached complete epidemic numbers, and I think we have to also admit that it is so pervasive in our culture right now because of the digital and technological revolution and this kind of becoming up underneath that. And so one thing I always like to say is, especially first of all, seek serious help if it's serious, seek professional help if it's needed.
How do they know if it's serious?
I think it always is, actually. It's always very damaging to go, but everyone can usually answer that question in regards to addiction. Like, are you absolutely addicted and entrenched, and is the shame getting worse? Is the cycle getting harder?
But it could get dangerous, right? Well, someone says, well, I'm not addicted, so it's okay.
That's a good point, yeah. And I think that actually is another lie people believe is like kind of I have control over. And so another thing, a way I'd re-say that is actually, no, you don't, right? And it's a distortion no matter what, and it's a slope no matter what. One thing I'll give, though, real quick, outside of the professional help and scriptures and maybe counseling or small groups, whatever, you also personally need to realize that the only way to beat an inferior pleasure is with a superior pleasure. And I use the example in the book of toilet water, right? Like if you're in the desert, and you're in the desert and you're about to die, and a toilet bowl shows up, you're gonna drink that water and it's actually gonna taste amazing. Like it's not gonna be gross, right? Because you're about to die, because you're dying of thirst. But if you're back home in your house and you're thirsty, you go to the fridge. And when you're walking to the fridge and you pass by the bathroom, you don't go, oh, don't drink the toilet water, don't drink the toilet water, right? You don't do that, because the superior thing fades out the inferior thing. And I think that's like that with Jesus, is that intimacy with him is what you're looking for anyways in the computer.
Exactly.
And it's better when you find it in him.
We miss out, things like pornography. We're missing out on such joy and abundance with Jesus for such a cheap thrill, and we take advantage of the grace of Christ, and it just cripples so many people.
Totally.
This is a great book, Terry. It really is.
Lots of reading there.
That Lasts. It's available wherever books are sold. And even though this is a very young couple, this book is very honest and real, and gives some things to consider that we don't normally hear about. So thank you for writing it.
Thank you for having us. Great to have you
Really
here.
appreciate you being here.